I found out my parents sold me before I was even born. Now they want me to pay the price. I always thought my life was normal. My parents weren't overly affectionate, but they provided for me. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. I had my own room, went to school like every other kid, and had dreams of going to college and making something of myself. Then, just as I turned 19, everything changed. It started with a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I had just come home from school and was walking past my parents' bedroom when I heard my mother's voice, tense and hushed. "He's almost 20. We can't keep delaying this." My father responded, frustration in his tone. "I know, but what do you want me to do?" "He's going to fight it." I didn't understand what they were talking about, but something about the way they spoke made my stomach twist. I stayed silent, pressing my ear against the door. "We made a deal," my mother said. "If we break it now, we'll lose everything." That was all I heard before the floor creaked under my foot, and I panicked, walking quickly to my room as if nothing had happened. But my mind was racing. A deal. What deal? And how did it involve me? That night at dinner, I acted normal, but my parents were quieter than usual. Finally, I decided to ask, "Is there something going on? You guys have been acting weird lately." My mother and father exchanged a look before my father cleared his throat. "We need to talk," he said. "There's something you should know." I put my fork down, okay? There was a long pause, then my mother exhaled sharply. "When you were born, we made an arrangement with the Liao family." That name sent a shiver down my spine. The Liao family was wealthy, powerful, and ruthless in business. My father had worked under Mr. Liao years ago before mysteriously quitting. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, my voice wary. My father wouldn't look at me. We owed them money." "How much?" He hesitated before finally saying, "More than we could ever repay." My heart pounded. "So what? You took a loan. What does that have to do with me?" Another pause. Then my mother spoke the words that shattered my world. "We promised you to them." The air left my lungs. I sat there, staring at them, waiting for them to say it was a joke. But they didn't. "What do you mean, promised me?" I whispered. My father sighed. "They agreed to wipe our debt clean. If you married their daughter?" My hands clenched into fists. "And you didn't think to tell me this? You just sold me before I was even born." "We had no choice," my mother snapped, her voice shaking. "You don't understand what they would have done to us. We would have lost everything. You would have grown up with nothing. I would have rather grown up with nothing than be treated like property." I shouted. My father finally met my eyes, his face unreadable. "It's time to pay back what we owe." I stood up so fast, my chair scraped against the floor. "No, absolutely not." "You don't have a choice," my mother said coldly. And that's when it hit me. They never saw me as their son. I was just a debt they had to settle. For the next few days, I tried to figure out a way out of this. Running away was an option, but where would I go? I had no money, no contacts. Every time I left the house, I felt eyes on me, whether it was my parents making sure I didn't escape or someone from the Liao family watching from afar. I didn't know. Then, one evening, my father dropped another bombshell. "You're meeting her tomorrow." I glared at him. "I'm not going." "You are." His voice was firm. "If you refuse, they'll come for us. Do you want that on your conscience?" I wanted to scream that this wasn't my problem, that I never asked for this. But deep down, I knew they were right. The Lyle family wasn't the kind to accept no as an answer. The next evening, I found myself sitting in a high-end restaurant, across from a girl I had never met before. She was my age, beautiful, but she looked just as miserable as I did. "I'm guessing you don't want this either," I muttered. She gave a bitter smile. "Doesn't matter what we want." There was silence between us before she said something that made my blood run cold. "My father told me that if you refuse, your family won't be around much longer." I gripped the table, my knuckles turning white. This wasn't just about marriage. This was a threat. I had to find a way out, and I had to do it fast. I found out my parents sold me. Before I was even born now, they want. Me, to pay the price, part 2. The dinner ended in silence. My so-called Leanne didn't talk much after dropping that bombshell, and I didn't blame her. We were both prisoners in this deal, trapped by our families, forced to obey because saying no meant destruction. A week later, we were married. It wasn't a grand romantic event like most people imagine. It was an obligation. The ceremony was lavish, attended by businessmen, politicians, and powerful families I'd never met. I barely even recognized my own parents under the fake smiles they wore. My mother was ecstatic, acting as if this was some sort of honor, while my father looked relieved, like he had just handed off a problem he didn't want to deal with anymore. Leanne looked beautiful in her wedding dress, but there was no joy in her eyes. I couldn't even bring myself to smile as we exchanged vows we didn't mean. When I slid the ring onto her finger, her hand was ice cold. When she put mine on, I barely felt it. It was official. I belonged to this family now. Cold, empty walls. Our new home was a massive estate owned by the Liao family, bigger than anything I'd ever lived in, yet it felt suffocating. Leanne and I barely spoke. The few words we exchanged were mechanical about household schedules, family meetings, and expectations. There was no warmth, no effort to make things easier. But the worst part, my mother-in-law. Madame Liao had made it painfully clear from the start that she despised me. I wasn't good enough in her eyes. I was a stray dog her family had been forced to take in, a burden she didn't want. She never missed a chance to remind me. "The suit doesn't suit you," she would say, eyeing me with disdain at family gatherings. "You look like a beggar who found expensive clothes on the street. Or when we ate together. Are you used to real food? Or do you miss the garbage scraps your parents built their fortune on?" I clenched my fists every time, swallowing my pride because I knew fighting back wouldn't end well. But it was getting harder every day. Leanne, on the other hand, remained distant. She didn't defend me, but she didn't join in either. It was like she was watching to see how I would react, as if testing me. The breaking point. It happened one evening at dinner. Madame Liao was in one of her usual moods, nitpicking everything about me. But this time, she took it too far. I still don't understand why my husband agreed to this. She sighed dramatically, stirring her soup. Bringing in his bloodline? His father was nothing more than a rat. Sniffing around for garbage money, pretending to be rich. I froze. My father. The same man who, despite everything, had worked his entire life to provide for me. The man who made a deal he thought would protect us, even if it was at my expense. The man who, despite his selfishness, had never let me starve, never let me suffer. I slammed my chopsticks onto the table. "With all due respect, madam," I said, my voice sharp, "I don't recall begging to be here. Your family dragged me into this arrangement, if I'm so disgusting to you. Why don't you blame yourself for accepting my father's garbage money? In the first place?" The entire room went silent. Madame Liao narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me?" I leaned forward, my anger boiling over. "You act like I'm some charity case, but you needed me. If my father's money was so filthy, then why did your husband sign the contract? Why did your daughter have to marry me?" Leanne finally looked up at me, her expression unreadable. Madame Liao scoffed. "You think you can talk back to me?" "I think I just did." My father-in-law, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Enough," he said. His tone wasn't angry, it was amused. Like he had been waiting for me to stand up for myself. "Let's eat." Madame Liao fumed but didn't say another word. That was the first time I felt like I had won something. A shift between us. After that, something changed between Leanne and me. One night, she knocked on my door. I was expecting more cold words. Maybe even another warning about speaking back to her mother. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, silent for a long moment before finally saying, "You were right." I frowned. "About what?" "My family needed yours. My mother won't admit it, but without you, we would have been ruined." I didn't know what to say. She sighed. I never wanted this either. But I was raised to obey, to accept that my life would never be mine. You're different." I let out a dry laugh. "I don't feel different. I feel like a prisoner." Leanne nodded. So do I. For the first time since we met, we understood each other. We weren't enemies. We weren't strangers forced together. We were both victims. And for the first time, I didn't feel so alone.